All right, welcome back from special area, guys. Mrs. Mullen, can you guys hear me? How about you, Mrs. Faulkner and Mrs. Holmes? Can you guys hear us in your room? All right, okay. And how about you, Mrs. Faulkner? I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me and everyone is on.
We got you.
All right, thanks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, happy Thursday. You guys can see the scoreboard there behind me. You guys can see the scoreboard on the screen. Ravenclaw still in the lead. So good job, Ravenclaw. Keep it up. And for all the other houses, you guys remember, every single day that we are working, the teachers are looking for ways to give you guys points for your participation. Every time that you're raising your hand and you guys are responding to questions, for simply getting your work done, okay, being alert, okay, you guys can earn points for a wide array of things. Why is your computer open over there? You don't need your computer open right now. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, let's jump right in. Today, we are going to be reading the next chapter in Harry Potter. Today, we're going to be reading chapter 15. If you've not already written this down in your agenda, I want everybody to take out your agendas right now, and I want you to write down our assignment for today. My homeroom was instructed to do so this morning, so right now, if you did not already do that, do it now. If you're uncertain if you did it, go back and check to make sure that you wrote it down. All right, Sophia, what's the homework today? What are we going to work on today in class? Good. And we're going to do this on notebook page 71. So, Frank, you should have written down, read chapter 15 and complete a set of notes of your choice. What page is it going to go on, Casey? This is going on page 71 in your notebook. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin today by setting up our notebook page for that chapter. And like we always do, we're going to spend a couple minutes just reviewing what happened in the last reading. And then today, we're going to go ahead and read through chapter 15, and we're going to be taking our notes. So each person right now, I'm going to scroll through our table of contents. Here are those directions. What page in the notebook should we be going to make this decision, Frank? We go to page what? Good. Everyone right now. And I should see everyone, even those students in my room who are supposedly keeping their notes in binders. Because I'm not so certain that the people that are keeping their notes in the binders for my class are actually keeping everything. Because I'm noticing a lot of people not putting things back into binders in the proper places. These page numbers are supposed to mean something. So regardless of whether you have a spiral notebook or whether you have a 3-ring binder, I should be able to come around and see your notebook looking like my notebook. I should see every single page. And I'm a little bit worried. Not a little bit. I'm more than a little bit. I'm a lot of bit worried. But there are many people just in my homeroom alone that can't say that about their notebooks. So if I was to tell students sitting right in front of me, turn to page 42, there are some people in this room that could not, because they have no idea where their page 42 is right now. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, for those that do know where your page 42 is, go to page 42 in your notebook. Choose what style of notes you want to do today. Raise your hand if you would like some sticky notes from me in my homeroom. Teachers, let me know if you guys run out of sticky notes. I will be happy to provide you with more. Okay, so right now, every single person, once you have made that decision, okay, go ahead and set your notes up for the next reading. You can see my notes here. All right, you can see I have my date, I have my title, chapter 15, Aragog. And this is page 71 in my notes. Okay, hands up for sticky notes. I don't know. I'm not sure. You can decide what you want to do. I'm going to give you plenty. Anyone else? Just the two people? And then Mrs. Holmes and Mrs. Faulkner, can you guys just let me know when your class has their notebooks set up with these three things and that you guys are ready to go on? I'd like to come around and have you guys show me your notebooks if you guys are keep happy.
You all stood with me, Mr. Trumbull?
Yeah, sorry, Mrs. Mullen. Oh, Mrs. Mullen, I did forget to mention about the grade reports. So you can let the kids know that.
First?
What's that?
Are you gonna talk about that right now then?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, so boys and girls, to start a class, I forgot. My homeroom, I just passed out your grade reports. Teachers, if you did not pass out grade reports yet, you can pass them out now. If you've already passed them out, everyone, you should take a second, look at your grade report. Take a second and look at your grade report. Mrs. Mullen gave a grade report. I'm giving you guys one as well. I would like for you, it's not written on the board, it wasn't written on my blog. If you guys get these signed, okay, I will give you a bonus 100 as a homework grade for getting this signed by a parent and bringing it back, okay? There's a spot for a student signature on the bottom. Now with this grade report, there's some good news and I think there's some bad news. The good news is this.
It can't hurt, but it can't hurt. What if you learn a test? That would make it go better, right?
Okay, so the good news about this is this. If you look at your grade report, okay, you will see we're well into the fourth quarter. Some of you are doing very well, all right, and others are not doing so well. Okay, but the good news is, again, that many people I've noticed since we're coming back 4 days a week are starting to improve. You also can look at this grade report and you can see all the assignments we've already done for quarter four, but you can also see the assignments that we have left to do for the entire year. Look at your grade report, Michelle. You're not even looking at it. Every assignment that we are going to do for the rest of the year is on here. So you can see exactly how many more tests you have to get your grade up if your grade is not where you want it to be. You can see exactly how many more homework or classwork assignments we have to do. Every assignment is written on here. So no one at the end of the year can say, oh, but I didn't know. You guys do know. This is exactly where you stand in the fourth quarter. Some of you are doing very good. Others need to take advantage of the assignments that we have left and make sure that you guys are doing your absolute best on each and every one of them. Okay, is there a question about your grade report before we get back into the notes? Sorry about how I overlooked that. And then Mrs. Mullen, you guys can go ahead and get started. Sophia, I have a question from you.
I'm looking at our things, and it says that I don't see a quiz for chapter 15. Is that like,
You don't see a quiz for chapter what?
I don't see a summary for chapter 15, so we're not doing a summary.
For where?
So
For under homework and classwork?
for chapter 15 notes on my grade report.
Yeah, because if you look up, chapter 15 summary is in the quiz section. It's in the assessment section. Because chapter 15 summary counts as a quiz. All right, so that remember, this one's going to be a quiz summary. Piper, do you have another question about your grade report?
There's no grade for chapter 14 quiz and
Because I didn't put those in yet. That's the only reason. All right, because listen, what did I tell you guys? I will go back as far as 1 week when it comes to your grades. So I'm not going back. So right now on this grade report, if you were missing notes from chapter 8, don't even bother trying to do them, guys. I'm not looking at them. We are about to read chapter 15. All right, so you going back and making up notes from chapter 8 or chapter 9 is just silliness. When did those notes need to be done? They needed to be done when we read the chapter. They don't do you any good 3 weeks or 4 weeks after the fact. Jane, do you have a question?
how come there's no chapter 17?
Because on chapter 17, we're only going to do a set of notes for chapter 17. All right, we're actually doing chapter 17 right around the same time as your Math New York State test. So we thought we'd go light on you guys for ELA that day. Sound good? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so again, your grade report, you guys bring it back tomorrow or as soon as you can with it signed, and that will count as an automatic 100 and as your homework grade. I will add that to your homework grade. All right, so put those aside.
No?
And then we can go ahead and get back into our notes. All right, Frank, at the top of your page, what is one thing that you should have on your notes?
Page number.
Good. What page is this, Frank?
Page 71.
Good. Casey, what's another thing that you should have at the top of your notes?
Title.
Title. What is the title for these notes?
Chapter 15 is Aragog.
Good. Chapter 15, Aragog. And Jasmine, what's the last thing that your notes need?
Date.
Date. And today's date is what? May 6th. So you could write that as 5-6, just like I did there. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, once you've picked your note-taking strategy and you have your notebook set up, before we read, what do we always do? Raise your hand in my room to share. What do we always do before we start reading the next chapter? Ruth? We go back and we review the last chapter. So everybody take a minute, turn back in your notes to your chapter 14 notes about Cornelius Fudge. And let's do a quick review. All right, Mrs. Holmes' class. Let's try to do this the way Mrs. Holmes was yesterday. I'm going to pick one from your room. You can pick them. Tell us, what is one thing from chapter 14, and try to start near the beginning, that we should make sure that we remember before we start reading chapter 15?
Hold on. I've got a student coming up. Quick, quick, quick. Mila, look.
You're next, Mrs. Say that again, Mila.
The Arabs attacked once again.
All right, the Heir of Slytherin attacked once again. That's something that happened in the beginning. Mila, who did the Heir of Slytherin attack?
Hermione.
Good, Hermione.
And someone.
So one of the things that happens near the beginning in this chapter is Hermione gets attacked. She is petrified. Okay, Mrs. Faulkner's room. What is something else from chapter 14 that we should remember before we start reading?
We've got Dumbledore has been suspended and Hagrid was sent to Azkaban.
All right, good. Tell your class that was technically two things. But, okay, so now we have that Hermione is petrified, Hagrid has gone to Azkaban, and Dumbledore has been suspended. Those are three of the big things that happened in that chapter. Anything else that happened in that chapter that is worth remembering before we start reading chapter 15? I'll go to someone in my room here. Rylan.
The diary was stolen.
Okay, Rylan brings up that the diary was stolen. Jolene, how about you at home? What's something that we should remember before we start reading chapter 15? Are you there, Jolene? All right, I'm going to pick someone from my room then. Parker?
Before Hagrid left, he said to follow the spiders.
Good. Hagrid's one piece of advice to the students was to follow the spiders. All right, I think that that's a good place. So that brings us up to where we are in our story. Hold on, we jump to your questions for a second, ladies. All right, so this is where we're at. In this chapter, Harry loses 3 really important people to him. Okay, and now his only piece of advice is that he should follow the spiders. That's the only piece of advice that he has from one of his mentors. Okay, and so now we're ready to start reading chapter 15. So everybody, go back to your notes in chapter 15. All right, you can see I've decided to do a set of Cornell notes myself.
Mr. Griffin,
I am on page 337.
Very nice one.
All right, everybody open up your books. Page 337. Looking around the room, looks like most people are there. And now think about the journey Harry's been on from the beginning of the book. Where did Harry start out in the beginning of the book? Where was he? Again, you guys could write it in the comment box if you wanted, but Justina? So the beginning, remember, I have to go back so far. Life for Harry in this book began back at the Dursleys. And then Dobby comes and shows up to give him what? A warning. Yeah, you guys can shout. He gives him a warning to do what? Not go back to Hogwarts. He still goes back to Hogwarts, though, although he got there in an odd way, didn't he? How did he have to get to Hogwarts? Piper?
Ron went to the Dursleys and broke Harry out of his room.
Okay, but how does he get back to Hogwarts? Again, instead of going on the train, he takes the flying car. All right, and then once he gets to Hogwarts, there are all kinds of things that seem to be happening. All kinds of strange things are happening. What are some of the strange things that begin happening right away? Sophia?
Harry and Ron can't go through the barrier.
Can't go through the barrier.
And,
Okay, that's one. Give us another one, Alicia.
Harry starts hearing voices.
Harry starts hearing voices. And Jasmine? People are getting petrified. Rylan? Okay, the Death Day party he goes to. But for Hogwarts, I don't know if that's that unusual. For Harry, it was definitely new. Okay, but we start thinking about, again, the voices Harry's hearing, the people getting petrified. All of these strange and scary things are happening at Hogwarts. Just like who warned? Just like Dobby had warned. And now, Harry's at a point in his story where he doesn't have his number one ally, smartest ally. I should say he has his number one ally, Ron. But he doesn't have that smart ally, and he doesn't have the mentors anymore. And that's where Harry is. Things are getting very intense. So what part of the story are we about to get up to? Jane? Okay, I know you guys can't hear Jane very well. Jane, think about the plot. Remember we did plot? What stage of plot are we on, or what part of the hero's journey are we about to be getting to? The Supreme Ordeal is what Jane just said. Okay, so we're well into Harry's rising action, working our way towards this Supreme Ordeal. And when we talk about plot, what's that same part called in plot? You guys all have it in your notebook. Ruth. The climax. Those two parts are exactly the same, whether you're talking about the Supreme Ordeal or the climax. So that's where we guys are leading up to. We're about to be building up to that part of our story. All right, now I'm ready to read, page 337. What do we do with words that we do not know, Michelle? Underline them. Chapter 15, Aragog. Summer was creeping over the grounds around the castle. Sky and lake alike turned periwinkle blue, and flowers large as cabbages burst into bloom in greenhouses. But with no Hagrid visible from the castle windows, striding the grounds with Fang at his heels, the scene didn't look right to Harry. No better, in fact, than the inside of the castle, where things were so horribly wrong. Harry and Ron had tried to visit Hermione, but visitors were now barred from the hospital wing. "We're taking no more chances," Madame Pomfrey told them severely, through a crack in the infirmary door. "No, I am sorry. There is every chance the attacker might come back to finish these people off." With Dumbledore gone, fear had spread as never before, so that the sun warming the castle walls outside seemed to stop at the mullioned windows. Ooh, what do you think I'm doing with the word mullioned? You better believe it. Bottom of page 337. There was barely a face to be seen in the school that didn't look worried and tense. and any laughter that rang through the corridors sounded shrill and unnatural, and was quickly stifled. Harry constantly repeated Dumbledore's final words to himself. I will only truly have left this school when none here are loyal to me. Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. But what good were those words? Who exactly were they supposed to ask for help when everyone was just as confused and scared as they were? Hagrid's hint about the spiders was far easier to understand. The trouble was, there didn't seem to be a single spider left in the castle to follow. Harry looked everywhere he went, helped rather reluctantly by Ron. They were hampered, of course, by the fact that they weren't allowed to wander off on their own, but had to move around the castle in a pact with other Gryffindors. Most of their fellow students seemed glad that they were being shepherded from class to class by teachers, but Harry found it very irksome. One person, however, seemed to be thoroughly enjoying the atmosphere of terror and suspicion. Draco Malfoy was strutting around the school as though he had just been appointed head boy. Harry didn't realize what he was so pleased about until the potions lesson about 2 weeks after Dumbledore and Hagrid had left. When sitting right behind Malfoy, Harry overheard him gloating to Crabbe and Goyle. I always thought Father might be the one who got rid of Dumbledore, he said, not troubling to keep his voice down. I told you he thinks Dumbledore's the worst headmaster the school's ever had. Maybe we'll get a decent headmaster now. Someone who won't want the Chamber of Secrets closed. McGonagall won't last long. She is only filling in. Snape swept past Harry, making no comment about Hermione's empty seat and cauldron. Sir, said Malfoy loudly, Sir, why don't you apply for the headmaster's job? Now, Malfoy, said Snape, though he couldn't suppress a thin-lipped smile. Professor Dumbledore has only been suspended by the governors. I dare say he'll be back with us soon enough. Yeah, right, said Malfoy, smirking. I expect you'd have Father's vote, sir, if you wanted to apply for the job. I'll tell Father you're the best teacher here, sir. Snape smirked as he swept off around the dungeon, fortunately not spotting Seamus Finnegan, who was pretending to vomit in his cauldron. I'm quite surprised the Mudbloods haven't all packed up their bags by now, Malfoy went on. Bet you 5 galleons the next one dies. Pity it wasn't Granger. Okay, take a minute. You guys should probably add a couple things into your notes. Good. If you have questions, write them down as well. If you're doing a style of notes which includes questions. Jocelyn, what's one thing you're putting in your notes? Just one thing you're adding. All right, Jocelyn just said she's including the detail about how Malfoy thinks that Dumbledore shouldn't come back. He doesn't want him to come back. How about somebody from your class, Mrs. Holmes? What's one thing that somebody wrote down in their notes?
Harry? Just say it out loud, honey, and I'll repeat it. Say that again. Things have been weird at the castle lately.
Things have been weird at the castle lately. Okay? You might want to be more specific. All right, how about somebody from Mrs. Faulkner's room? It's something that you guys put in your notes. One thing. Frank. Are you there, Mrs. Faulkner?
Yeah, I was just waiting for my cue. Emma says that she wrote down that Draco thinks that Snape should apply for headmaster.
Okay. And you'll notice in my notes for everyone, I'm trying to encompass everything. So basically, I include this detail here, and this is what I said. Everyone is scared, except Draco. He is happy about Dumbledore. I'm trying to encompass, and there are these first 2 to 3 pages, what's going on? What's the big picture? This chapter begins with everybody at Hogwarts feeling how, Justina?
Sad and scared.
Sad and scared. All right? All except for, it seems to be this one person, which is Draco. Draco seems to be real happy about what's going on. Okay? So, when you guys are writing down your details, if you're writing down very specifics, you want to make sure you're including every single one of those things. Okay? Or you're going to try to do what I'm doing here, and I'm trying to encompass what has been happening on the first 2 to 3 pages. All right? Getting a feel for how the chapter is beginning. All right, Jocelyn. All right, do you need to go? Okay. All right, back into the reading. Page 340. The bell rang at that moment, which was lucky. At Malfoy's last words, Ron had leapt off his stool, and in the scramble to collect bags and books, his attempts to reach Malfoy went unnoticed. "Let me at him," Ron growled as Harry and Dean hung on to his arms. "I don't care. I don't need my wand. I'm going to kill him with my bare hands." "Hurry up. I've got to take you all to herbology," barked Snape over the class's heads. And off they marched, with Harry, Ron, and Dean bringing up the rear. Ron still trying to get loose. It was only safe to let go of him when Snape had seen them out of the castle, and they were making their way across the vegetable patch towards the greenhouses. The herbology class was very subdued. There were now 2 missing from their number, Justin and Hermione. Professor Sprout set them all to work pruning the Abyssinian shrivel figs. Harry went to rip an armful of withered stalks onto the compost heap and found himself face to face with Ernie Macmillan. Ernie took a deep breath and said very formally, "I just want to say, Harry, that I'm sorry I ever suspected you. I know you'd never attack Hermione Granger, and I apologize for all the stuff I said. We're all in the same boat now, and, well..." He held out a pudgy hand, and Harry shook it. Ernie and his friend Hannah came to work at the same shrivel figs as Harry and Ron. "That Draco Malfoy character," said Ernie, breaking off dead twigs. "He seemed very pleased about all of this, doesn't he? Do you know, I think he might be Slytherin's heir." "That's clever of you," said Ron, who didn't seem to have forgiven Ernie as readily as Harry. "Do you think it's Malfoy, Harry?" Ernie asked. "No," said Harry so firmly that Ernie and Hannah stared. A second later, Harry spotted something. Several large spiders were scuttling over the ground on the other side of the glass, moving in an unnaturally straight line, as though taking the shortest route to a prearranged meeting. Harry hit Ron over the hand with his pruning shears. "Ouch! What are you..." Harry pointed out the spiders, following their progress with his eyes screwed up against the sun. "Oh, yeah," said Ron, trying and failing to look pleased. "But we can't follow them now." All right, stop and write something in your notes. What happened in herbology class? Just write it down. From back there, Rylan, can you see the board very well?
Not really the full beat, but somewhat.
As long as you can turn your head around the plexiglass, you can see it? Okay. I'm trying to keep it as big as I can back there for you guys. All right, again, look at my notes. Notice what is going into my notes. The reason I'm showing you my notes more often today is because a lot of people are using a lot of pronouns in their notes. I'm seeing a lot of it's, theys. They're not being specific. There are two things so far that happened. One, Ernie apologizes to Harry. I wrote that down first. And the second, Ron and Harry see the spiders. These are what are the two important things that have happened? If these two things are not in your notes, they should be in your notes. Okay? Is the fact that Ernie is working with the Gryffindor students on their whatever, their breaking of the twigs, I can't even remember the name of it, the Abyssinian shrivel figs, is that important? No, so it's not in my notes. I don't care that they're working on shrivel figs together. But what I do care is that, hey, Ernie apologized. You could add one other thing about Ernie in there as well now, too. Who does Ernie and everybody now start to think is the real heir? Who are they starting to think might be the heir, Justina? Maybe it's Draco. If we look at how people are acting, you know, Harry, we don't believe it's you. He's apologizing, all right? And we might add the fact that maybe it's Draco now is what people are thinking. Frank, do you have anything important that that needs to be said right now before I keep reading?
Can I go to the bathroom?
You were instructed to go before class, so please go, hurry up, and get back here as quickly as you can. All right, I'm on the bottom of page 341. But we can't follow them now. Ernie and Hannah were listening curiously. Harry's eyes narrowed as he focused on the spiders. If they pursued their fixed course, there could be no doubt about where they would end up. Looks like they're heading for the Forbidden Forest. And Ron looked even unhappier about that. At the end of the lesson, Professor Sprout escorted the class to their Defense Against Dark Arts lesson. Harry and Ron lagged behind the others so they could talk out of earshot. We'll have to use the invisibility cloak again, Harry told Ron. We can take Fang with us. He's used to going into the forest with Hagrid. He might be some help. Right, said Ron, who was twirling his wand nervously in his fingers. Aren't there supposed to be werewolves in the forest? He added, as they took their usual place at the back of Lockhart's classroom. Preferring not to answer that question, Harry said, there are good things in there too. The centaurs are all right, and the unicorns. Ron had never been into the Forbidden Forest before. Harry had entered it only once and had hoped never to do so again. Lockhart bounded into the room, and the class stared at him. Every other teacher in the place was looking grimmer than usual, but Lockhart appeared nothing short of buoyant. Come now, he cried, beaming around him. Why all these long faces? People swapped exasperated looks, but nobody answered. Don't you people realize, said Lockhart, speaking slowly as they were all a bit dim, the danger has passed. The culprit has been taken away. Says who? Said Dean Thomas loudly. My dear young man, the Minister of Magic wouldn't have taken Hagrid if he hadn't been 100% sure that he was guilty, said Lockhart in the tone of someone explaining that one and one made two. Oh, yes, he would, said Ron even more loudly than Dean. I flatter myself I know a touch more about Hagrid's arrest than you do, Mr. Weasley, said Lockhart in a self-satisfied tone. Now again, what do we know? Raise your hand. What do we know, Piper?
Ron and Harry used invisibility cloak to sneak to Hagrid's hut.
So to do what?
To sneak to Hagrid's hut.
Okay, so what do we know about Ron and Ron's knowledge of Hagrid's arrest?
He was there in person.
So who do you think knows more, Lockhart or Ron? Ron. That's what we know. We know that Lockhart doesn't know more than what Ron knows.
Yeah.
Ron was there. He heard it all.
But Lockhart doesn't know that.
All right, back, continue our reading. Actually, now would be a good time to write something down in your notes if you've not written something down. Take a moment. What is Harry and Ron? What are they planning to do? And what does Lockhart believe? What does Lockhart believe, Casey? Put it in your own words. I have never heard you walk around using the word culprit. So what does he believe? But who's the person? Hagrid. Okay? So in your notes, you might put down something about how Lockhart believes that it is Hagrid. Hagrid's the one. Lockhart believes that we're all safe now, guys. All's good. The world has been made new again. Hagrid is gone. We're all safe. Okay, and you see how, Casey, that requires us to take a second, critically think, and then put it in our own words. Okay, back on bottom of page 343. Ron started to say that he didn't think so, somehow, but stopped in mid-sentence when Harry kicked him hard under the desk. "We weren't there, remember?" Harry muttered. But Lockhart's disgusting cheeriness, his hints that he had always thought Hagrid was no good, his confidence that the whole business was now at an end, irritated Harry so much that he yearned to throw gadding with ghouls right in Lockhart's stupid face. Instead, he contented himself with scrawling a note to Ron. "Let's do it tonight." Ron read the message, swallowed hard, and looked sideways at the empty seat, usually filled by Hermione. The sight seemed to stiffen his resolve, and he nodded. What does Harry mean when he says, "Let's do it tonight," Justina?
That what he means by let's do it tonight is that they should go into the Forbidden Forest.
Okay, I'm looking for 3 words. What are they going to do tonight? Jasmine. Thank you. Those are the 3 words. 50 points for your house. Follow the spiders is what he means. Let's do it tonight. Do what? Follow the spiders. Page 344. The Gryffindor common room was always very crowded these days because from 6 o'clock onward, the Gryffindors had nowhere else to go. They also had plenty to talk about, with the result that the common room often didn't empty until past midnight. Are you okay there, Frank?
Yeah.
Okay, it's distracting. Harry went to get the invisibility cloak out of his trunk right after dinner and spent the evening sitting on it, waiting for the room to clear. Fred and George challenged Harry and Ron to a few games of exploding snap, and Ginny sat watching them, very subdued, in Hermione's usual chair. Harry and Ron kept losing on purpose, trying to finish the games quickly. But even so, it was well past midnight when Fred, George, and Ginny finally went to bed. Harry and Ron waited for the distant sounds of 2 dormitory doors closing before seizing the cloak, throwing it over themselves, and climbing through the portrait hole. It was another difficult journey through the castle, dodging all the teachers. At last, they reached the entrance hall, slid back the lock on the oak front doors, squeezed between them, trying to stop any creaking, and stepped out into the moonlit grounds. "Course," said Ron abruptly as they strode across the black grass, "we might get to the forest and find there's nothing to follow. Those spiders might have not been going there at all. I know it looked like they were moving in that sort of general direction, but..." His voice trailed away hopefully. They reached Hagrid's house, sad and sorry looking with its blank windows. When Harry pushed the door open, Fang went mad with joy at the sight of them. Worried he might wake everyone at the castle with his deep, booming barks, they hastily fed him treacle fudge from a tin on the mantelpiece, which glued his teeth together. Harry left the invisibility cloak on Hagrid's table. There would be no need for it in the pitch-dark forest. Okay, you guys should pause for a second. Write something down in your notes. Where are Harry and Ron now going? What are they doing? You just write it in your notes. Yes, Jocelyn? Okay. Anybody writing a question down? I'm curious. I have a really big question right now. Casey?
Should Snape apply for headmaster?
We haven't read about Snape in 2-3 pages now. That's not the question that should be coming into your mind right now. Think about what we just read. We haven't read about Snape. We've been reading about Harry and Ron sneaking out of the castle with their robe down to Hagrid's hut, where they've left the invisibility cloak on his mantle and they're about to go into the forest. Rylan?
What do you think will happen in the forest?
Okay, that's kind of a decent question. What do you think's going to happen? Alicia?
Either Harry and Ron would go into the Forbidden Forest.
That's a good question. If you were them, if you were Harry and Ron, would you go into the forest? Or we could take Alicia's question and think of it this way. Do you think it's a wise decision for Harry and Ron to be going into the forest right now? Do we think that this is smart? Trying to predict what's going to happen next, that's a good thing to do. Okay, it's a good reading strategy, making predictions. But so is here, what Alicia, you're really doing here is you're getting into the book and you're critically analyzing and connecting with these characters. And you're questioning and you're critically thinking about what they're doing. All right, Jasmine?
If you were Harry and Ron, would you follow the spiders just to move closer?
Yeah, that's what Alicia just said. You just added a couple other words. Piper?
If you were Harry and Ron, would you invisibility?
Yeah, okay, you got the last idea. Is it smart
No.
for them to leave the invisibility cloak behind? All right, so these are the kinds of things that we should no longer be thinking about Snape. Snape was 2-3 pages ago, okay? Now we're well into Harry and Ron sneaking out of the castle with the invisibility cloak. They're at Hagrid's hut, and they're about to go into the Forbidden Forest without the invisibility cloak. So many questions come to mind. None of them include the word Snape. Bottom of 345. Harry left the invisibility cloak on Hagrid's table. There would be no need for it in the pitch-dark forest. I argue I've got plenty of need for it in the dark forest. Come on, Fang. We're going for a walk, said Harry, patting his leg, and Fang, bounding happily out of the house behind them, dashed to the edge of the forest and lifted his leg against a large sycamore tree. Harry took out his wand, murmured, "Lumos!" and a tiny light appeared at the end of it, just enough to let them watch the path for signs of spiders. Page 346. Good thinking, said Ron. I'd light mine too, but, it'll probably blow up or something. Harry tapped Ron on the shoulder, pointing at the grass. 2 solitary spiders were hurrying away from the wand light, into the shade of the trees. Okay, Ron sighed, as though resigned to the worst. I'm ready. Let's go. So, with Fang scampering around them, sniffing tree roots and leaves, they entered the forest. By the glow of Harry's wand, they followed the steady trickle of spiders moving along the path. They walked behind them for about 20 minutes, not speaking, listening hard for noises other than breaking twigs and rustling leaves. Then, when the trees had become thicker than ever, so that the stars overhead were no longer visible, and Harry's wand shone alone in the sea of dark, they saw their spider guides leaving the path. Harry paused, trying to see where the spiders were going, but everything outside his little sphere of light was pitch black. He had never been this deep into the forest before. He could vividly remember Hagrid advising him not to leave the forest path last time he'd been in here. But Hagrid was miles away now, probably sitting in a cell in Azkaban. And he had also said to follow the spiders. Something wet touched Harry's hand, and he jumped backward, crushing Ron's foot, but it was only Fang's nose. What do you reckon? Harry said to Ron, whose eyes he could just make out, reflecting the light from his wand. We've come this far, said Ron. So they followed the darting shadows of the spiders into the trees. They couldn't move very quickly now. There were tree roots and stumps in their way, barely visible in their near blackness. Harry could feel Fang's hot breath on his hand. More than once, they had to stop so that Harry could crouch down and find the spiders in the wand light. They walked for what seemed like at least half an hour, their robes snagging on low-slung branches and brambles. After a while, they noticed that the ground seemed to be sloping downward through the trees, though the trees were as thick as ever. Then Fang suddenly let loose a great echoing bark, making both Harry and Ron jump out of their skins. What? Said Ron loudly, looking around into the pitch dark and gripping Harry's elbow very hard. There's something moving over there, Harry breathed. Listen, sounds like something big. They listened. Some distance to their right, the something big was snapping branches as it carved a path through the trees. Oh no, said Ron. Oh no, oh, shut up, said Harry frantically. It'll hear you. Hear me? Said Ron in an unnaturally high voice. It's already heard Fang. The darkness seemed to be pressing on their eyeballs as they stood terrified, waiting. There was a strange rumbling noise, and then silence. What do you think it's doing? Said Harry. Probably getting ready to pounce, said Ron. They waited, shivering, hardly daring to move. Do you think it's gone? Harry whispered. Dunno. Then, to their right, came a sudden blaze of light, so bright in the darkness that both of them flung up their hands to shield their eyes. Fang yelped and tried to run, but got lodged in a tangle of thorns, and yelped even louder. Harry! Ron shouted, his voice breaking with relief. Harry! It's our car! What? Come on! All right, now it would be a good time for you guys to stop, put something in your notes. So again, as you're writing your notes, we think about the big things that are pushing our story forward, and you'll see that's what makes it into my notes. Ron and Harry see the spiders. Lockhart thinks the threat is gone. And then R and H here stand for Ron and Harry, because I knew it was going to be a longer bullet. So I wrote Ron and Harry use the invisibility cloak to follow the spiders. I could have added into the forest. And what do they happen to find in the forest, Alicia? They find the car. Do you have a question for me?
Yeah. What I was going to ask before they went in the forest was, do you think they'll find the Voldemort again?
Do we think they'll find Voldemort
Yeah.
in the forest?
Not like what we
Again, what makes us think that Voldemort is in the forest?
In the first
Huh? We've barely even heard of Voldemort right now in this book. We've been hearing about the heir of Slytherin. All right, let's keep reading. Okay, but we're reading the books. And in the first book, Voldemort doesn't go into the forest at all. There's no mention of Voldemort escaping into the forest. So let's keep reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. All right, I am on page 348, near the bottom. Come on! Harry blundered after Ron toward the light, stumbling and tripping. And at a moment later, they had emerged into a clearing. Mr. Weasley's car was standing, empty in the middle of a circle of thick trees under a roof of dense branches, its headlights ablaze. As Ron walked open-mouthed toward it, it moved slowly towards him, exactly like a large turquoise dog greeting its owner. "It's been here all the time," said Ron delightedly, walking around the car. "Look at it. The forests turned it wild." The sides of the car were scratched and smeared with mud. Apparently, it had taken to trundling around the forest on its own. Fang didn't seem at all keen on it. He kept close to Harry, who could feel him quivering. His breathing slowing down again, Harry stuffed his wand back into his robes. "And we thought it was going to attack us," said Ron, leaning against the car and patting it. "I wondered where it had gone." Harry squinted around on the flood-lit ground for signs of more spiders, but they had all scuttled away from the glare of the headlights. "We've lost the trail," he said. "Come on, let's go and find them." Ron didn't speak. He didn't move. His eyes were fixed on a point some 10 feet above the forest floor, right behind Harry. His face was livid with terror. Harry didn't even have time to turn around. There was a loud clicking noise, and suddenly he felt something long and hairy seize him around the middle and lift him off the ground, so that he was hanging face down. Struggling, terrified, he heard more clicking and saw Ron's legs leave the ground too. Heard Fang whimpering and howling. Next moment, he was being swept away into the dark trees. Head hanging, Harry saw what had hold of him was marching on 6 immensely long, hairy legs, the front 2 clutching him tightly below a pair of shining black pincers. Behind him, he could hear another of the creatures, no doubt carrying Ron. They were moving into the very heart of the forest. Harry could hear Fang fighting to free himself from a third monster, whining loudly. But Harry couldn't have yelled even if he had wanted to. He seemed to have left his voice back with the car in the clearing. Okay, take a minute, write down what happened to Harry, Ron, and Fang. Yes, Parker? Oh, Jane?
My wire on your bike came out of my bracket, and I just need a mirror for focus. Can I go to the bathroom?
Can you say that louder?
My wire came out of my bracket, and I just need a mirror to fix it, so can I go to the bathroom?
Yes, you can. Sorry it took me so long. It's just very hard. I thought the light back there was going to help me see your hand easier, but it doesn't help me see your hand easier. Something about the way that barrier reflects the light. All right, you guys ready to keep reading? All right, what'd you put in your notes, Michelle?
Harry, Ron and Fang get swept up by monsters.
Very good. Right after they find the car, they get swept. They get captured. I don't know what word you would want to use. The word captured comes to my mind, but they get captured by these giant. We know them to be spiders because they've got 8 legs. Harry sees 6 of them. They're on the ground. 2 of them are carrying him. So these are giant spiders that are big enough to carry people. Okay, let's keep reading on page 330. He never knew how long he was in the creature's clutches. He only knew that the darkness suddenly lifted enough for him to see that the leaf-strewn ground was now swarming with spiders. Craning his neck sideways, he realized that they had reached the ridge of a vast hollow, a hollow that had been cleared of trees so that the stars shone brightly onto the worst scene he had ever laid eyes on. Spiders. Not tiny spiders like those surging over the leaves below. Spiders the size of cart horses, 8-eyed, 8-legged, black, hairy, gigantic. The massive specimen that was carrying Harry made its way down the steep slope toward a misty domed web in the very center of the hollow, while its fellows closed in all around it, clicking their pincers excitedly at the sight of its head, or sight of its load. Harry fell to the ground on all fours as the spider released him. Ron and Fang thudded down next to him. Fang wasn't howling anymore, but cowering silently on the spot. Ron looked exactly like Harry felt. His mouth was stretched wide in a kind of silent scream, and his eyes were popping. Harry suddenly realized that the spider that had dropped him was saying something. It had been hard to tell because he clicked his pincers with every word he spoke. Aragog, it called. Aragog. And from the middle of the misty domed web, a spider the size of a small elephant emerged, very slowly. There was gray in the black of his body and legs, and each of the eyes of his ugly pincered head was milky white. He was blind. What is it? He said, clicking his pincers rapidly. Men, clicked the spiders who had caught Harry. Is it Hagrid? Said Aragog, moving closer, his 8 milky eyes wandering vaguely. Strangers, clicked the spider who had brought Ron. Page 352. Kill them, clicked Aragog fretfully. I was sleeping. We're friends of Hagrid's, Harry shouted. His heart seemed to have left his chest to pound his throat. Click, 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 went the pincers of the spiders all around the hollow. Aragog paused. Hagrid has never sent men into our hollow before, he said slowly. Hagrid's in trouble, said Harry, breathing very fast. That's why we've come. In trouble? Said the aged spider, and Harry thought he heard concern beneath the clicking pincers. But why has he sent you? Harry thought of getting to his feet, but decided against it. He didn't think his legs would support him, so he spoke from the ground as calmly as he could. They think, up at the school, that Hagrid's been setting something on students. They've taken him to Azkaban. Aragog clicked his pincers furiously, and all around the hollow the sound was echoed by the crowd of spiders. It was like applause, except applause didn't usually make Harry feel sick with fear. But that was years ago, said Aragog fretfully. Years and years ago. I remember it well. That's why they made him leave the school. They believed that I was the monster that dwells in what they call the Chamber of Secrets. They thought that Hagrid had opened the chamber and set me free. And you didn't come from the Chamber of Secrets? Said Harry, who could feel cold sweat on his forehead. I, said Aragog, clicking angrily, I was not born in the castle. I come from a distant land. A traveler gave me to Hagrid when I was an egg. Hagrid was only a boy, but he cared for me, hidden in a cupboard in the castle, feeding me on scraps from the table. Hagrid is my good friend and a good man. When I was discovered and blamed for the death of a girl, he protected me. I have lived here in the forest ever since, where Hagrid still visits me. He even found me a wife, Mozag.
Oh my.
And you see how our family has grown, all through Hagrid's goodness. Harry summoned what remained of his courage. So you never attacked anyone? Never, croaked the old spider. It would have been my instinct, but out of respect for Hagrid, I never harmed a human. The body of the girl who was killed was discovered in a bathroom. I never saw any part of the castle but the cupboard in which I grew up. Our kind like the dark and the quiet. And right now, if we've not stopped and written something in our notes, we need to write something down in our notes. Several things. Okay, what does Harry learn from Aragog just now? Frank, what are you going to put in your notes?
I was gonna say that, would it be a spoiler to say who the girl was that died?
Right now, yes, but there's the girl that was killed in the bathroom. So that could be something that goes in your notes. What else would be perhaps more important to be putting in your notes? Alicia?
The Aragog told Harry it was a cube that came out of the chamber. It was something else.
Good. Aragog is telling Harry right now, I am not the monster. I was not born in the castle. I've never been in any chamber. What did Hagrid do when it was suspected that the monster was Aragog? Justina?
He protected her.
He protected him. Hagrid protected Aragog. And for it, what happened to Hagrid? Because Hagrid protected Aragog, what happened to Hagrid? John?
He got kicked out of school.
He was expelled. These are things, guys, again, you guys can be adding into your notes. We've just learned all of these things. 1, Aragog is not the monster. Hagrid, was he the one that opened it 50 years ago? No, we're finding out that what was Hagrid guilty of? Protecting Aragog. And that's what he gets expelled for. All right. Anything else that you might want to put in your notes?
A question.
John has a question. John, what's the question you're putting in your notes?
Do you think the person that died 50 years ago could have been Bernie Myrtle?
Okay, that is a good question that you could be asking yourselves right now. Okay? Do you think that perhaps the girl that was killed in the bathroom was the girl that's currently haunting a bathroom?
That's what I was gonna say.
John did it in a tricky enough way to ask it as a question. All right, let's keep reading. And again, focus. You guys don't have to wait for me to say stop and write something down for you guys to write something in your notes. All right, as I've been reading, there are some pages that will have several important things on it, and then maybe another page or two where you don't write anything down. Okay, I'm back on page 353 near the bottom, where Aragog says never, and then he goes on to tell him he only saw the cupboard, our kind like the dark and the quiet. Okay, so I'm on the very last line of 353. But then, do you know what did kill that girl, said Harry? Because whatever it is, it's back and attacking people again. His words were drowned by a loud outbreak of clicking and the rustling of many long legs shifting angrily. Large black shapes shifted all around him. The thing that lives in the castle, said Aragog, is an ancient creature we spiders fear above all others. Well, do I remember how I pleaded with Hagrid to let me go when I sensed the beast moving about the school? What is it? Said Harry urgently. More loud clicking, more rustling. The spiders seemed to be closing in. We do not speak of it, said Aragog fiercely. We do not name it. I never even told Hagrid the name of the dread creature, though he asked me many times. Harry didn't want to press the subject, not with the spiders pressing closer on all sides. Aragog seemed to be tired of talking. He was backing slowly into his domed web, but his fellow spiders continued to inch slowly towards Harry and Ron. We'll just go then, Harry called desperately to Aragog, hearing leaves rustling behind him. Now, before we get into the next scene, what does Harry, again, just learn from Aragog? Sophia?
That there's a monster in the castle that even Aragog and his family fear.
Very good. So the monster that is in the chamber is a monster that Aragog, a giant spider himself, fears. Okay, again, John, I like that you're adding that to your notes. I'm watching you write that down now as you're hearing these things. Okay, so the monster, whatever this monster is, now Aragog knows it. Aragog knows what the monster is. He's just not telling.
Because it must be that bad.
It's kind of like
to
saying
scare a big.
Voldemort's name.
It's kind of like kids calling out. I can't possibly hear everyone at once. But yes, you are correct. It's like he who must not be named, and it's like he is so scared of this monster that he can't even say the monster's name. All right, I'm on page 354. This chapter ends on page 359. Let's continue. Down at the bottom, Casey, Harry says, we'll just go then. Harry called desperately to Aragog, hearing leaves rustling behind him. Go? Said Aragog slowly. I think not. But, my sons and daughters do not harm Hagrid on my command, but I cannot deny them fresh meat when it wanders so willingly into our midst. Goodbye, friend of Hagrid. Harry spun around, feet away, towering above him. Towering above him was a solid wall of spiders, clicking, their many eyes gleaming in their ugly black heads. What's about to happen to Harry and Ron? They're about to get eaten. Write it down if you don't have it in your notes. Harry and Ron are about to be eaten. They're about to be killed, Casey. You could even ask a question here in this moment. What would you do? What do you think they should do? Page 355. Even as he reached for his wand, Harry knew it was no good. There were too many of them. But as he tries to stand, ready to die fighting, a loud, long note sounded, and a blaze of light flamed through the hollow. Mr. Weasley's car was thundering down the slope, headlights glaring, its horn screeching, knocking spiders aside. Several were thrown onto their backs, their endless legs waving in the air. The car screeched to a halt in front of Harry and Ron, and the doors flew open. "Get Fang!" Harry yelled, diving into the front seat. Ron seized the boarhound around the middle and threw him, yelping, into the back of the car. The doors slammed shut. Ron didn't touch the accelerator, but the car didn't need him. The engine roared and they were off, hitting more spiders. They sped up the slope out of the hollow, and they were soon crashing through the forest, branches whipping the windows as the car wound its way cleverly through the widest gaps, following a path it obviously knew. Harry looked sideways at Ron. His mouth was still open in a silent scream, but his eyes weren't popping anymore. "Are you okay?" Ron stared straight ahead, unable to speak. They smashed their way through the undergrowth, Fang howling loudly in the back seat, and Harry saw the side mirror snap off as they squeezed past a large oak. After 10 noisy, rocky minutes, the trees thinned and Harry could again see patches of sky. The car stopped so suddenly that they were nearly thrown into the windshield. They had reached the edge of the forest. Fang flung himself at the window in his anxiety to get out, and when Harry opened the door, he shot off through the trees to Hagrid's house, tail between his legs. Harry got out too, and after a minute or so, Ron seemed to regain the feeling in his limbs and followed, still stiff-necked and staring. Harry gave the car a grateful pat as it reversed back into the forest and disappeared from view. All right, I'm going to stop right there. You guys should write about how they get rescued. Because the last note in your notes should be something about how they're about to get eaten. They were about to be eaten. Yes, Parker?
It's when
Okay, so, Hunt, did you put that in your notes? You should. You should put that thought in your notes. So, Parker was just sharing his thoughts about, when they finally get back to talking to Hagrid, wouldn't they have something to say to Hagrid?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think, Jasmine?
I think Hagrid told him about the spiders, so they knew that he opened the thought that he opened the chamber of secrets, and he told them about the spiders, so he doesn't question him about it.
Well, go back to Parker, what Parker was saying, because I don't think Parker and you are thinking the same. Parker, why do you think Harry and Ron need to go talk to Hagrid?
Because they need to be ask telling Hagrid or ask Hagrid no, they should.
Yes, you do. I know exactly what you're thinking about. I know exactly what thought is going through your head. You're just having a hard time putting it into words.
Why didn't you want to know about how they could be dangerous?
Yeah, are you crazy are the words that come to my mind. The first words out of my mouth to Hagrid would be, Hagrid, are you crazy? You told us to follow the spiders? What did the spiders almost do? Eat them! Hagrid, your advice almost got us killed. Are you crazy, Hagrid, telling us to follow those spiders? They almost ate us.
But I told him something to add. It was worth doing it because they found out that Hagrid didn't open the chamber secrets 50 years ago, and that underground is afraid of monster in the castle again.
All right. So Sophia says, but it was worth it. Let me ask you this question. Would it be worth it if the car wasn't there? They would know, but they'd be dead.
Comes with a price.
Okay. So they would know the truth, but the truth would die with them and nobody else would know.
Yeah.
So,
Somebody else follows them.
who's the hero of this chapter? The car. Let's keep reading. Let's keep reading, and anytime we have left over, we can spend with some discussion questions. Page 356. Near the bottom, Harry went back into Hagrid's cabin to get the invisibility cloak. Fang was trembling under a blanket in his basket. When Harry got outside again, he found Ron being violently sick in the pumpkin patch. "Follow the spiders," said Ron weakly, whipping his mouth off of his sleeve. "I'll never forgive Hagrid. We're lucky to be alive." "I bet he thought Aragog wouldn't hurt friends of his," said Harry. "That's exactly Hagrid's problem," said Ron, thumping the wall of the cabin. "He always thinks monsters aren't as bad as they're made out. And look where it's got him. A cell in Azkaban." He was shivering uncontrollably now. "What was the point of sending us in there? What have we found out? I'd like to know." "That Hagrid never opened the Chamber of Secrets," said Harry, throwing the cloak over Ron and prodding him in the arm to make him walk. "He was innocent." Ron gave a loud snort. Evidently, hatching Aragog in a cupboard wasn't his idea of being innocent. As the castle loomed nearer, Harry twitched the cloak to make sure their feet were hidden, then pushed the creaking front doors ajar. They walked carefully back across the entrance hall and up the marble staircase, holding their breath as they passed corridors where watchful sentries were walking. At last, they reached the safety of the Gryffindor common room, where the fire had burned itself into glowing ash. They took off the cloak and climbed the winding stair to their dormitory. Ron fell onto his bed without bothering to get undressed. Harry, however, didn't feel very sleepy. He sat on the edge of his four-poster, thinking hard about everything Aragog had said. The creature that was lurking somewhere in the castle, he thought, sounded like a sort of monster Voldemort. Sort of monster Voldemort. Even other monsters didn't want to name it. But he and Ron were no closer to finding out what it was, or how it petrified its victims. Even Hagrid had never known what was in the Chamber of Secrets. Harry swung his legs up onto his bed and leaned back against his pillows, watching the moon glinting at him through the tower window. He couldn't see what else they could do. They had hit dead ends everywhere. Riddle had caught the wrong person. The heir of Slytherin had got off, and no one could tell whether it was the same person or a different one who had opened the chamber this time. There was nobody else to ask. Harry lay down, still thinking about what Aragog had said. He was becoming drowsy when what seemed like their very last hope occurred to him, and he suddenly sat bolt upright. "Ron!" he hissed through the dark. "Ron!" Ron woke up with a yelp like Fang, stared wildly around, and saw Harry. "Ron! That girl who died! Aragog said that she was found in a bathroom," said Harry, ignoring Neville's snuffling snores from the corner. "What if she never left the bathroom? What if she is still there?" Ron rubbed his eyes, frowning through the moonlight, and then he understood too. "You don't think... Not Moaning Myrtle." The end. Okay, take a minute and finish filling out your notes. Each person in my room, each person in all the classrooms in 6th grade, and anyone at home who may be listening, write your final thoughts down in your notes. What is it that Harry thinks he's figured out at the end? I'm looking at the clock, and we have exactly 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes. So this is what we're going to do. In this 10 minutes, it gives every single person in Mrs. Faulkner, Mrs. Holmes, and my room plenty of time to upload their picture of their notes. Make sure that they have all the date, the title, and the heading at the top. Make sure that your notes have a nice full page. When you look at my notes, they are Cornell notes. But when you look at my notes, I've got 8 to 10 bullets over here. I've got 3 questions over here on this side. And I have a brief summary focusing on just the details at the bottom, which gives me a good foundation for tomorrow's 45-second summary challenge. Your notebook pages, guys, should be filled. There's some people that are doing a T-chart, and they're only doing like one side of the T-chart, and it's only maybe half filled. So essentially about 1/4 of their page has got notes on it. Other people who are doing webs are maybe only writing 3 or 4 details from the entire chapter in their web. That's not enough. Okay, yeah, I'm looking at Justina's web, and her web kind of fills the entire page. It starts in the middle, and it just kind of flows outward. So when you are done with your notes, you really kind of should have a page full, which is not too much to ask when we think about the length of these chapters. These chapters are anywhere between 25 to 30 pages long. So if we just stop every 1 to 2 pages and write something down, we're easily going to fill a page with everything that's been going on. Okay, so take a minute and upload your picture. And then because we have time at the end of class, I want to go ahead and start talking about some of these discussion questions today. And whatever we don't finish, we'll just come back to tomorrow. We'll have more time to do some discussion. So keep your notes out for the discussion, guys. Okay, everybody upload a picture first. And then Mrs. Holmes and Mrs. Faulkner, once everybody's uploaded a picture, you guys can really just mute me and use the questions for any remaining discussion in the last 9 or 10 minutes here. Yes, you can.
Can we ask the questions that we wrote down?
Yes, and that's one of the things I really want to get to and start with is your questions. I want to start with your questions and not do mine yet. Okay. Did you upload your picture, Casey? Are you working on getting that? Okay. Oh goodness, Casey. In the last video, we talked about are Cornell notes the right choice for you? And we said, maybe a web would be something that would work better. Okay, if your goal is to get better at note-taking strategies, then Cornell notes are a fine strategy. But you need to make sure that you're getting them handed in. Because remember, you only have 1 week, and I never got your chapter 14 notes. I still don't have those notes. So I don't know if making the same mistake on this chapter notes is going to help you out in the long run. You might need to make a wiser decision about what style of note you're going to do. One that fits better with your style. All right, so guys, let's go ahead. Let's end class today by beginning to talk about what kind of questions did you guys have as we were reading. So, Michelle, start us off.
Do you think Moaning Myrtle is upset about all the attacks because she might have been the girl that died?
All right, you might ask it more, how do you think Moaning Myrtle is feeling about all these attacks? Okay, if Moaning Myrtle is the girl that died, how do you think Moaning Myrtle is feeling about all these attacks? Is that kind of get the heart of what you're asking?
Yeah.
All right, so Michelle, ask it again and raise your hand if you guys want to answer it.
How do you think Moaning Myrtle feels about all the attacks?
Okay, go ahead, call on people.
Ruth.
Well, I think that way that Moaning Myrtle something like she would be kind of, I don't know, glad because people can understand, I don't know, what they're thinking of them. She's really petty.
Frank. Have you uploaded your picture yet?
Yeah.
Neatly? All right, keep calling on people, Michelle. And try to speak loud, because the louder you guys speak, the better it is. The video can pick up what you guys are saying.
Well, I think she might be really sad or upset because, like, if she's the one that died, she doesn't want others to die along like that.
Good, keep going.
Saying her nickname's Moaning Myrtle, I think she's just always moaning, so eliminate the difference. And also, she's always in the bathroom, and only Hermione goes in the bathroom. And if she is, usually Ron and Harry do because they're up to something. So she probably doesn't even know a lot about what's going on in the rest of the classroom.
First off, several really good responses to Michelle's question. Michelle, you got anybody else you want to hear from? Okay, that's a great question. Does anybody else have another question? I'm going to give Rylan a good 50 points. I'm going to give John another good 50 points for his response. All right. Go ahead, John. Start as well. Actually, let's go to Piper. Piper, you have a question?
It's kind of like the same thing about it, but if you were Harry and Ron, would you investigate Moaning Myrtle and ask her, like investigate?
Okay. So if you were Harry and Ron, because now at the very end of that chapter, Harry thinks that it's Myrtle. So if you were Harry and Ron, would you go to Myrtle now? Explain. Go ahead. It's your question. You ask. You call on people.
Well, I think that we should, because, I think that it'll help me find more information about the monster.
Michelle.
Yeah, I do think that they should go to Moaning Myrtle. Because then, if they figure out more stuff about the attacks, if Moaning Myrtle is the girl who died, they could maybe figure out who the monster is or what the monster
They m-
is. Because she might remember.
Yeah.
Riley.
I would guess that if they did investigate her, which they probably will, and I would, that they might even find out where the Chamber of Secrets is.
Not just what the monster is, but where's the Chamber of Secrets itself? Okay. What a good question that turned out to be. All right, Ruth, you have a question?
Yeah.
All right, let's hear it.
Chapter 15, Harry and Ron almost get eaten by spiders before the saves them.
Uh-huh.
What's the closest you know to them to death?
Okay. She's going for a level 3 one. And I like kind of how you said it for the camera that might not have heard it. In this chapter, Harry and Ron basically become very close to death. They almost get eaten by spiders. What's the closest you've ever come to a situation like that? And if you're not comfortable answering it, you never have to answer a question. All right? It's Ruth's question, so Ruth, you call on people.
She called on me. I've never been that close, but I just wanted to answer it. Because that's kind of crazy getting that close.
So you've never been close.
No.
Good. Okay, that's fine. Good. That's an answer. Keep calling on people, Ruth.
Sophia.
There's 2 times, but there was this one severe time. I was in Long Island where there's like big waves that are in the ocean, and
Mhm.
I was going swimming with my uncle and my dad, and there was this huge wave that like swept us up, and we just went like under the water at like this fast amount of speed, and we like, I thought we were going to die.
Okay, so you were in the ocean and you felt like you were going to drown. Okay. Ruth? Casey, once you upload your picture, yeah, you're done with that.
Me and my cousins and my brother, we were going swimming on Marvin Bay, but then my brother and my cousin Brandon wanted to go on the lake.
You can wipe it off.
Me and my cousin Alan didn't like it, but we ended up going anyway because they were too paddling, and when we got out there, the waves were like tall.
Uh-huh.
And we got smashed into the shore where there was we went out of the way, we got smashed into the shore where there was a big wall.
So your near-death experience was also on the water,
Yeah.
similar to Sophia's? All right. Keep calling some others, Ruth. We got time for maybe 1 or 2 more.
So
Keep it brief. So, like, again, hers was on the water.
this was
Uh-huh.
But I fell
Uh-huh.
and hit my chin on the edge of the septic tank.
Uh-huh.
We didn't have a cap then. That's when we got one because we didn't have it.
Okay.
And I had like,
So you had a major injury to your, like, jaw and your face.
yeah,
All right, one last person.
scar.
You still do? Okay, you get one last person to share their near-death experience.
So, when my mother was pregnant with me, because she did a lot of drugs, probably most of my, when I was a baby, because she still did drugs, and yeah.
Okay. Do we want to end on that? All right.
And on that, and
Okay.
on that. Very much near death.
It can be. All right. So thank you for sharing, Frank. Again, no one has to share anything they're uncomfortable with. All right. Last person, Ruth. And I'm going to close out the video as well. You guys, your only homework is to make sure that you have uploaded a picture of your notes.